Hey everybody. Beautiful day in Manitoba. Thanks for joining me today. I want to commend Manitobans for their continued efforts at sticking to the fundamentals and keeping our COVID curve flat. And I want to say a special few words about our roadmap to recovery here. If we want to lead the country in recovery, and we have been in some categories most certainly, we need to get the best advice. Je vais vous parler aujourd'hui de notre feuille de route pour le rétablissement. Si nous voulons diriger le pays dans la reprise, nous avons besoin de meilleurs conseils. Last week I had the opportunity to meet with representatives of some of Canada's major business organizations, leading think tanks. This included the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Macdonald-Laurier Institute, the Business Council of Canada, the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy that is located at the University of Ottawa, and also the Conference Board of Canada, as well as a very interesting meeting with the Parliamentary Budget Officer to discuss firsthand, at appropriate social distance, the scope and the pace of Canada's economic recovery and our financial situation during COVID, and what this means for Manitoba's prospects and what this means for Canada's prospects going forward. And this is an issue that I think is in the minds of all Canadians right now as we watch what's going on around the world, as we see the dynamic nature of the challenges that COVID presents to us and to people all over the planet. I think there's a danger that we be daunted about the challenges that we face. I think having a sense of direction about where we're going is very important. I'll have more to say on this tomorrow, and I'll have more to say on this next week in terms of Manitoba-specific plans that we want to outline. I was the first Premier to reach out in person to these organizations, and I can share with you, and it was very exciting to hear this, that in every meeting people praised Manitobans and Manitoba's performance in respect of COVID. And they expressed also their appreciation for the opportunity to discuss together our current challenges and the opportunities for growth. Many of these organizations are also in a state of flux right now, their offices not operating at anywhere near full steam. And so I wanted to say thank you to them, and did, but publicly to say thank you to them for making their time available to us for these meetings, because they were, I think they would agree, I hope, exciting, dynamic discussions. As we move together through these challenges, there are also some opportunities. And so our discussions focused on two main issues: Canada's current and forecast economic and financial situation, including the state of business confidence and federal government actions towards economic recovery. Remembering that most of these meetings took place on Monday and Tuesday, the finance minister was slated to go out with a so-called fiscal update the following day. Manitoba's fiscal and economic recovery situation was also specifically something I wanted to address and to pick, frankly, the brains of the people that we had the chance to meet with on how we were doing and what we could do better. There are several recurring themes that emerged from these meetings, but I think the resounding one was that we must move to recovery as a country. And as Manitobans, we understand this. We are a trading province. That's our history, pre us becoming a province, and it's our future too. And so for us to succeed in Manitoba, we need our country to succeed, because it is our country, our brothers and sisters across Canada, that are our chief trading partners, and they're the people that Manitobans depend upon to help them create jobs and opportunity. And so we need a national strategy on recovery. We all succeed when Canada succeeds. Nous avons besoin d'une stratégie nationale de rétablissement. Nous réussissons tous lorsque le Canada réussit. And so that is why today I'm calling on the federal government to make some specific program changes that will promote growth and job creation. Number one, CERB. Now, it's been misrepresented at times, I think, and that would be on me for not being more clear in my communications. So let me be clearer today than I perhaps have been in the past. My problem with the CERB isn't CERB. My problem is with the design of CERB. It is the design of the CERB program that I've been raising with the Prime Minister and will raise with my colleagues across the country in letter. I have raised it on our meetings, but I will raise it in writing, that I am very concerned about. And I think more and more small business organizations and think tanks are understanding the problems with the CERB design. At the beginning of this pandemic, the CERB program was essential. It is less essential now, but no less important to have it. But now is the time to shift our focus more to recovery to help Manitobans and Canadians get back to work. Now, CERB is increasingly acting in its design as a disincentive to some Canadians. It's become a barrier. It's presenting obstacles to Canadians who would like to safely return to work full-time. It's making it more difficult for employers, frankly, as well, to bring some of their employees back into the workplace. And the federal government should be encouraging Canadians to go back to work as much as possible on a full-time basis if it is safe to do so. Now, we know that on the foundation of this recovery lies the safety that people have to feel, whether it's the workers at the store or the shoppers going into it. And we understand that as a prerequisite. But we also understand that fighting for safety, while on the one hand, while discouraging people from going back and working in that place that provides the service that you need, is counterproductive. What do I mean? Well, the current CERB rules disqualify all workers who earn more than $1,000 a month. In other words, if you earn $1,000 a month, then you're eligible for $2,000 additional dollars. This means you have a total gross income of $3,000. But if you earn one additional dollar, you lose $2,000. This is a tax. You could call it a clawback. What it means is that someone who's approaching getting that $1,000 is going to be discouraged from getting $1,001. And for this reason, the program needs to be redesigned. It needs to be redesigned to make sure that people aren't penalized for working and for wanting to support their families without having to be dependent on the CERB $2,000 per month. It's a problem that demands a solution. I've been speaking about it for some time, and I do think it's very, very important that you understand that our program, the Manitoba Job Restart Program, wasn't designed to shame anyone who's receiving CERB, but quite the opposite, was designed to encourage those who didn't want to be dependent on the CERB so that they could then go back and use the skills and training they have to work. And so our Restart program was launched just a few days ago, and it was designed to pay $2,000 to workers as a measure so that they wouldn't have to lose the CERB program and be shocked on their cash flow. It was designed to make up for that loss and compensate them so that they could then resume working more hours. And I'm proud to say that already more than 2,500 Manitobans have applied for that Restart program and want to get back to work, and we're getting hundreds of applications daily. We've had 600 in the last 2 days. Now, I'm encouraged that Manitobans be given that opportunity, but we need Canadians to be given this opportunity. We need to provide this opportunity for all Canadians to get back into the workforce if they can, where there are jobs, where they can be safe. And so I'm calling on the federal government to redesign the CERB program and gradually phase Canadians back to work, full-time, more part-time hours, either way, so they can get back on their financial feet. As our recovery moves forward, our labor force must grow, and we must help grow our labor force. Notre force de travail doit croître, alors nous devons donc accroître notre force de travail. Secondly, the federal wage subsidy program. Going forward, policy measures have to focus on encouraging businesses to open. And to do that, we need to help workers transition off CERB and into employment. It's well understood in hindsight, and this is not a criticism of the federal government. I want to be clear. But in the early days of the pandemic, the federal government announced the CERB program. It also announced a wage subsidy program. It didn't launch the wage subsidy program until over 5 weeks later. The problem with that was, of course, employers and employees made the decision to go for the immediate cash in the CERB program and defer applying for the wage subsidy program. Now, you see, the problem with that was, and it's seen in the response, the CERB program is well oversubscribed, and the budget has been already raised, I think, twice by the federal government. I expect it to be raised again. The wage subsidy program, on the other hand, was undersubscribed because of in part, the lateness of its announcement. But the wage subsidy program, quite rightly, is a better program for assisting companies in rehiring and for getting workers back to work. Yesterday, the federal finance minister, Bill Morneau, announced his decision to extend that program until December. I applaud that decision. It is something we've been advocating for some time, and it is, as we know here in Manitoba, as we begin to safely restore our services and reopen our economy and our communities, vitally important that small businesses, who are our engine of growth, be given the opportunity to receive some support in order to transition back to full operation. And this announcement by the federal government yesterday is to be commended. But I would also encourage the federal government to look at the gaps within this program and to expand its eligibility. Currently, if you are losing 30% of revenue and can prove it, you are eligible for full benefits under the wage subsidy program. But if you're losing 29%, you're eligible for zero. We don't think that cliff is helpful, and we think that a waterfall, a cascade approach, if you will, that allows for lesser benefits for those companies who certainly are losing revenue and can't get back to full operation is a reasonable modification of the program. So I've written a letter to my fellow premiers I referenced earlier, urging them to join with me in encouraging the federal government to make changes to CERB to remove the disincentives to work, and also to encourage some modifications and improvements in the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. I think these two changes will be well received by Canadians. I know from the groups we met with that they are supportive of these ideas, and I do believe that there's good outcomes that will happen as a consequence of the redesign of both these programs. Finally, I wanted to share with you that obviously I'm perhaps overly excited about the consequences of those discussions, but I do think it's valuable. I also think it's fair to point out, and I think you're perhaps noting it here today, I've missed you, and I think that face-to-face has a lot to commend itself. You can get a lot done with Skype, you can get a lot done through electronic means, but face-to-face, maybe I'm talking like a guy who's just got old habits, maybe that's it, but I don't think so. I think face-to-face meetings have a place, and our face-to-face meetings bore fruit. We're going to have a Restart Manitoba task force go to Ottawa with cabinet ministers. We endeavored to schedule some additional meetings with elected officials over the last month. Again, I do not want this taken as a criticism of our federal colleagues. They have, I think, worked diligently in every respect. But I think it's time for us to get back to some face-to-face on a number of fronts. We've got some issues. I'll tell you more about the issues as we get closer to the time. We are looking at a time in the first half of August, and we're already in the process of doing our best to arrange that. We understand that Parliament will be sitting for a couple of different days over the next 2 months, and we're looking to coincide our meetings, obviously, with the time that they would be back in Ottawa. So I've struck the planning process for a Restart Ministerial Task Force for us in Manitoba. I want to build on the advice and work that our Economic Opportunities Advisory Board is in the progress of doing. They're on 4 different projects right now that they are researching and consulting on, and I expect to have those preliminary reports in the next couple of weeks. We're excited to work with our colleagues in Ottawa. We're excited to see some progress happen. And as I said before, virtual meetings are useful, but they're no substitute, in my mind, not a complete substitute anyway for in-person meetings. And that's why we want to see these meetings happen, obviously with the safety of everyone concerned as a primary precondition to those discussions. Manitobans deserve to feel proud of the success we've achieved thus far. But as Dr. Roussin reminds all of us, we must remain vigilant. We must stick to the fundamentals that got us here. None of us wants to see a COVID comeback, as we are seeing in many parts of the world right now. Nous ne voulons pas de retour de COVID, nous voulons le retour de Canada. We all succeed when Canada succeeds, so thank you. We'll keep focused on Manitoba succeeding, but we'll always remember, as Manitobans, that we are a proud part of the Canadian family. Any questions?
We've seen the low numbers here in Manitoba down to
sorry, Stephen. I'll take your questions. I am told that the format today is I'll take questions for a while from you, and then there are a number of people on the line.
Yes.
So we'll go to them after. The other day we went to them first, today you first, and then we'll return to you after those questions for additional questions if you desire.
Sure.
Sorry, Steve.
We're down to one active case in Manitoba, and we're seeing dozens of cases reported daily now in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Some people are concerned about the open border, non-self-isolation for other Western provinces, and now we've got a tourism campaign launched yesterday encouraging people to come to Manitoba.
Mm-hmm.
Given the fact that these other provinces are still seeing COVID cases, do you think it's wise to advertise and launch tourism campaigns and encourage people to come here for non-essential purposes?
Yes, Manitoba offers the safest site for you to visit in the country and one of the safest in the world. We are good at observing the fundamentals with the odd faux pas here and there. But the reality is that we're diligent here, and we know that we can't continue to live in fear. That being said, we have to exercise responsible relaxing of the past rules and so on. So we've begun that process of doing so. I would also say, in defense of my colleagues in the West who have seen some new numbers, that the important number is the percentage of positive test, not the number of cases. And even with those new cases, Saskatchewan remains still one of the safer jurisdictions in the world, as you know. So none of us is here in government or anywhere else, I don't think, advocating that we stop being conscious of the fundamentals, and following them is really critical. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have a cure. And COVID's a miserable threat. So we have to stick to the fundamentals here. But we can't allow a continued shutdown of every aspect of our economy to threaten the very future of our quality of life.
And part of the wave of people that might be coming in could be CFL players, where Winnipeg is being considered as a potential hub city for the CFL. As you know, you're a sports enthusiast. A lot of CFL players come from the United States and from states like Texas and some of the southern states where they have massive COVID numbers. Are you worried? Are you willing to have Winnipeg be a hub city for the CFL? And are you concerned that that also represents a threat for importation of the virus?
I'm concerned that we'd be dismissive of the possibility of allowing people to come to our province because there are a lot of other people who have COVID when they don't. I'd be concerned about that. I think as long as the precautionary measures and the self-isolation periods and the other recommendations of our health officer are respected and followed, then I think that we're not in an unreasonable position to offer relative safety. And in offering relative safety, if we can then advance our economy and our social lives, then that's a good thing. Yes, I do miss my sports. I do. But I don't think there's a day coming very soon we're going to have the ability to get back in the stands and cheer on the Bombers to that next Grey Cup. I'm realistic about this, and I think all Manitobans must be. And Dr. Russin has said it repeatedly, the day of big public gatherings isn't here yet. That doesn't mean the day of a broadcast, simulcast possibility of watching football should never come. So I think we can draw the distinction here and realize we must maintain safety on the one hand, but we can't let our fears cause us to remove every other aspect of our lives. Many Manitobans are out now outside and healthier because of it. Interesting observation, I think, in an analysis I recently read about COVID comebacks in other jurisdictions where it's so hot that people are reverting back to living inside again and transmitting COVID inside at increased rates. Interesting parallel, right? Here in Manitoba, summer is, well, from my estimation, it's too short. We should arrange for longer summers. But the fact of the matter is, it's so precious to us that we remain outside. And it is healthier to be outside if you can be.
Have you talked
with social distance?
Have you spoken with the CFL, you or one of your ministers, about Winnipeg being a hub city? And
I'll say we have more to say on that in due course when there's something to say.
When you see
Talk
the
about-
CERB numbers that came out from the federal government and Statistics Canada last week, more than 250,000 Manitobans that are on it, and you see more than 2,500 Manitobans that have applied for the Job Restart Program, would you like to see more people have applied for that? Are you discouraged by those numbers at all with just the discrepancy of them, or how are you feeling with the program and the uptake?
Pretty good. I think what I'm getting from our MLAs is that they're encountering people who aren't aware of our programs. So I think there's some promotion where it's under discussion to do a little bit more focused promotion of our programs so people are aware of them. I think there probably would be a bigger uptake where there's greater awareness. I do.
We've had other people saying that either they haven't been called back to work because it hasn't been open, so they don't have that ability to get off CERB because they need that money. Or other people and some store owners and business owners saying we really need some help with PPE. Have you reconsidered that extra help for that area at all?
No, the extra help for PPE is there for anyone who wants to use our wage subsidy program. If they use the wage subsidy program, they'll get half the wage for the first 5 employees that they pay, up to a maximum of $25,000. And if they aren't in receipt of the wage subsidy program from the federal government, they're eligible for our GAP program. And I'll share all the updated numbers with you. What I wanted to do is, we may see each other more frequently than once a week, but I will make a habit of making sure I bring an update once a week on the progress on the uptake on these. I will say that the uptake, back to your, Brittany, to be fair, back to your PPE question. As a former small business owner, I can tell you, having that assistance to bring people back to work, $25,000, that creates a cash flow opportunity for me. And then I have the money that I can use for whatever purpose I choose. If I have to put shields up at my on my counter in my store, I have a little bit of cash available to do that. Every business is different, and not every business has the same needs for PPE. Whereas, by freeing up the cash flow with the wage subsidy program, you let the business decide where they want to allocate the $25,000.
Mr. Premier.
A better program because it gives the flexibility to our very diverse small business community to use the money the way they see fit.
Sorry, Mr. Premier. With respect to the importance of face-to-face meetings, when can we expect a return to the legislature in person? Will there be a session in August? Obviously, priority, of course, the restart of the economy, but other government business as well. When can we expect that to happen?
Normal course would have us return the first week of October. That's what I anticipate. I've asked our House leaders, though, my House leader, I can't instruct the NDP House leader, but I've asked the House leaders to get together to discuss how we can end this barrier to progress that was missed in the rule discussions that preceded us coming back in 16, coming into power in 16. We can't have a continuation where you can block legislation absolutely, totally ad infinitum. That's just not fair or right. You know, in Canada right now, there are half a dozen governments that are in minority situations that are able to advance legislation because they have rules that allow you to do that. In Manitoba, we have a majority government that's able to be obstructed by a minority opposition. That can't be allowed to continue. It's not fair to the people of Manitoba. They spoke in an election half year ago. They elected us. We want to debate and discuss the legislation, and we want to give it the full attention it deserves. But to be able, for the NDP opposition to be able to simply say no and block legislation for years to come, it's an intolerable situation, and it has to be resolved.
Mr. Premier, you weren't wearing a mask in the Toronto airport. What example does that set for other people, considering your position?
Well, it wasn't appropriate behavior. I've spoken to that. I was wearing a mask until I approached 2 people who weren't. And then, not having seen them for a year, I thought it best to slide my mask down to talk to them at appropriate distance. So that's what happened. I've spoken to it.
Who else was there? You were with Andrew Scheer. Who was the other friend you were with?
You'll have to do your research on that.
Mr. Premier, have you already dedicated anybody to the Restart Task Force, and how many people and kind of what mix of ministers and other people might we see on that?
Yeah, okay, so we've got a number of meetings we'd like to see, but then there's the question of, do you put 8, 9 cabinet ministers on the same plane, and there's a security issue there too, so we're working on it, and I'll share with you the issues, but you know that there are a number of them, and I'll just name 3. Healthcare supports, our transfers. We have to have a discussion about sustainable partnerships with Ottawa on that issue. Infrastructure, we've got our proposals for infrastructure have been at the federal government desk for a while. One of those issues, obviously, a big one of longstanding, as you know, is getting the process underway successfully to build the outlet channel to give the people in the central part of the province their lives back on that, with that project's proceeding. We have several other issues that are at the forefront that I want to get driven forward, and our counterparts at the federal government need to know what those are as well. So I'll give you more detail when we can firm up the scheduling with our Ottawa counterparts.
Premier, you were away in Ottawa or in Eastern Canada for close to a week, but you bunched your meetings over a day and a half. Would you describe the trip as a combination of vacation and business?
Well, I sought medical advice, Larry, before I went, and Dr. Roussen's advice was followed. He said that approximately a 4-day period of isolation will allow me to monitor my symptoms and see if I caught anything on the plane. Essentially, that's how I took it. And so I did exactly as he said. Taxpayers in Manitoba don't get a bill for 4 days of me waiting to see if I'm healthy, though. So
Your 66th birthday was in that period. Did you
prior to that time? Yeah.
before the meeting? But
thanks for mentioning that, Larry.
But so you didn't spend your 66th birthday alone in a hotel self-isolating, I hope.
No, no, my wife was with me, and the taxpayers don't get billed for that either. Yeah.
Mr. Premier, today your government announced that the Emergency Measures Act is going to be continued for another 30 days. Do you see an end to that at some point, or are we going by 30-day periods, especially unless we're looking at ending it potentially within 30 days when we look at the numbers that we have with just one active case, no new cases for 2 weeks? Why just 30 days if we're going to continue regardless of the numbers that we have?
Yeah, it's, and we were all optimistic. We're all hopeful, but we're realistic too. And we've seen the COVID comebacks around us. You referenced earlier the Saskatchewan cases around the world. We're seeing, I think, the highest case reports ever in the 7 United States in the last couple of days. Around the world, COVID comebacks are rampant in a number of jurisdictions. It's here. I'd love to give you that optimistic tone on this. I'm trying to balance out my optimism with that's based on what Manitobans have done, because I still say Manitobans are the ones who deserve the credit for the response they have given to COVID. But I think it would be dangerous to be communicating overly a sense of optimism about the long-term prospects that this COVID challenge presents us with.
Why put a 30-day cap on it? Why not just have something more open-ended than that?
There's the opportunity to do some revisions. Dr. Roussen spoke about this, I think, yesterday. I expect he'll be speaking to you again tomorrow, a couple of days. We're going away from a phased announcement of a broad base and rather on a case-by-case basis being able to make some modifications and changes. And within the next 30 days, we hope to be able to make some other announcements and changes as well.
When you see how well Manitoba's doing, and we touched on this, and Steve asked you a little bit about this before, and then you look to some of the Western provinces who are now starting to see some of those increases again. Are you concerned about, Travel Manitoba's put out this Come Visit Manitoba? We've said, Manitobans explore your backyard here, but encouraging people to travel here. Especially from the West. I mean, we do need to open up business and we need to allow businesses to flourish again, but is there a concern?
Well, I think I addressed that earlier. I think that there's an equal and opposite concern that if we close our borders out of fear, that we will suffer economically and socially. And so it's a balancing act, and I think that's a fair observation. We have the benefit in Western Canada having some of the safest jurisdictions in the world. Promoting Manitoba, I think, is the right thing to do. I think we've, as opposed to maybe the province where the Saskatchewan Rough Riders used to operate out of, I think we've got more to offer tourists. So I think we should be promoting Manitoba. And so I applaud Travel Manitoba's efforts to encourage people to visit and come here, remembering that the presupposition here is that they're acting safely when they come.
There's been some concern about sports team names, including in this province specifically Morden, same name as the Washington's NFL team. And you could add, say the Warriors, Nippon Natives perhaps. Do you think that these names are appropriate?
I did a fair bit of research on this when I was the Indian Affairs critic. This is a number of years ago, and met with many First Nations leaders, elders, community members on this topic specifically. The consensus view was that the key wasn't the word, it was the handling of the word. It was the logo, it was the promotional materials, it was the depiction. And so in many cases, Indigenous people felt it wasn't an offense, for example, to reference Chief Blackhawk in the Chicago franchise's name, because that was a historical, respectful reference, and it was handled that way. But the chop at an Atlanta Braves baseball game is something that does offend people. And so each sports franchise is going to have a good inward look at how they are handling these issues respectfully, and they must be handled respectfully.
You would suggest these teams have those internal discussions?
Well, they need to, and they should involve Indigenous people in the discussions, as I did when I did my research 15 years ago on this issue. Because it is the way in which the words are used that it is important to understand. And in some cases, the word itself may not be acceptable to Redskins. Washington Redskins should have changed their franchise name 20 years ago. But I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. We're going to go to the phone now. And first up from CBC Radio Canada, Mohammed.
Hello, Mr. Premier. It's Mohammed from CBC Radio Canada. I was wondering, do you know how long will last the Manitoba Drug Restart program? Is it linked to the CERB?
Yeah, I'll have more to say on that tomorrow, Mohammed.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I don't have another question.
Okay, thank you.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Hi, Mr. Premier. Jeff Keel, CTV. You talked about needing a national strategy for recovery. But that being said, even if, Canada, if we keep seeing our rates going the way they are, compared to other countries in the world, we're doing quite well. Are you concerned from an economic standpoint going into the future, and I mean years, not just this year, based on what's happening down south, that we are going to be some sort of economic island and it's going to be tough to get back to where we were pre-pandemic? Because, I don't think I have to, and you touched on it already, I don't think anybody has to spell out what's happening in the U.S. is a cause for concern.
That's a very good observation, Jeff. The reality is we're a trading nation, not just with each other, but with the world. And so world economic circumstances impact on the world. And we're part of that planet. That being said, I see these challenges as real, and I'm reminded of the old serenity prayer. You control the things you can and accept the things you can't, but do something about the things you can. And in this case, one of the things we can do is reduce trade barriers among our provinces. Manitoba's been leading the way in pursuing that goal. It's another one of the initiatives that we want to pursue and have pursued in the past that we're going to continue to pursue now, because the time for us to get the barriers out of the way to doing business with each other in our country is here. And if we can create more jobs inside our country with fewer trade barriers, and the World Bank itself says we can, to the tune of putting about $1,500 on the kitchen table of every Canadian family, then we should be doing that right now. And so losing markets globally to some degree is a very real possibility as COVID continues. Gaining benefits internally to our country is an absolute imperative to make up for those losses.
And sorry, could I just ask a clarification question on your CERB comment?
Sure.
Are you calling on the federal government to make changes to the CERB program and keep it, or simply phase it out and focus more on wage subsidy?
No, I'm calling on them to do a redesign to allow for people to return to work without losing $2,000 when they get past $1,000 a month. They need to redesign the program. They should have done it months ago. I'm encouraging them to do it going forward. People want to take another shift, but they're telling me, and these are people, real people, and I'm hearing this across the country, and I heard it from the think tanks and the smart people we talked to in Ottawa. It's a real factor. Not every part of the country is opening up the way Manitoba is, but as parts of the country open up, people who used to serve in restaurants, people who used to work at grocery stores, people who used to work in hotels are being invited to go back to work, and they're declining shifts because they'd be crazy to take another shift because they'd lose $2,000 of their CERB if they did. That program has to be redesigned so people are able to take another shift if they want to and not be punished for it. So what you can do, one model you could do is every dollar above $1,000, you lose 50 cents a CERB. Therefore, you're still ahead. And continue that way until you get to a certain level, and then eventually CERB's gone. In this way, people are able to make a little more money instead of losing $2,000 by going back to work. Long overdue.
From City News, Jonas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Premier. The very talented and thorough journalists have already kind of gone through everything, so I'll just wish you a happy belated birthday and move along. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Jonas, thank you so much. I see a lot of nods in the room from people who agree with you on that, and I appreciate your congratulations on my birthday, but long since I turned 40 have I celebrated the advancing years very much.
From the Brandon Sun, Colin.
Hi, Mr. Premier. Colin with the Brandon Sun here. I saw in the press release that the province put out that you're calling for a phased reduction of CERB. I was just wondering if you could tell me what kind of time frame you had in mind when it comes to that phased reduction.
Should start as soon as possible. The impediments are real. The sooner we get them out of the way, the better. And then the people I've spoken to and other Canadians will be encouraged to go back to work without suffering a $2,000 tax when they do.
And how long do you think it should be until the program is completely phased out?
Well, I'd like it to not be necessary. So I guess the honest answer is I wish we didn't need the CERB program. We have other programs. We have a social safety net. We have the EI program. We have welfare, and other programs are layered all over the country to help people when they have needs. The CERB program was introduced solely for this pandemic and in response to it. The pandemic is still real. The program needs to continue to exist, but it needs to continue to exist in an effective manner that doesn't penalize people from going back to work where recovery is imminent. And recovery is starting in Manitoba and elsewhere in the country, and we need a program that helps to speed that recovery, not slow it down.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. With our remaining time, we now go back to the reporters on the floor.
Sorry, Paul, you forgot to mention talented, inquisitive reporters. I believe we should.
Premier, I just want to clarify something you told a colleague a minute ago, or a few minutes ago. So in the Toronto airport, when you saw Andrew Scheer, and I believe the second person was Ted Falk, without a mask, that's when you decided to remove yours. Is that correct?
Larry, your paper's done a series of stories on this, and so I'll invite you to continue to do so if you wish.
But that's what. So
I've addressed the issue. I've addressed it in the statement. I've addressed it today, and I'm through addressing it. If you've got another question, I'm happy to take it.
Goes against with what Mr. Scheer says. Mr. Scheer says that he just took off his mask to have a phone to take a phone call. So, but you were saying that when you saw these two without a mask, then you decided to take your mask off, correct?
It doesn't contradict with anything Mr. Scheer said in any way, shape, or form.
I was going to ask you that your itinerary and your time off. I understand you went to Ottawa and perhaps Toronto as well. Did you go elsewhere?
No, straight to Ottawa. I went to Toronto to land, and then because there's no directs to Ottawa, flew to Toronto, connected.
And then stayed in Ottawa the whole time?
Yeah.
Mr. Pallister, with our
Well, in
continued,
the capital region.
Yeah.
with With our continued U.S. border closure and the possibility it could be extended some more, have you had any conversations with Manitoba businesses who are really having a difficult time, and what are we going to see there? How do you plan on helping that? Or
Yeah, we continue. We've got a lot of dialogue going on a regular basis, though not to the same frequency as we did in terms of our calls. Weekly now with about 50 different business groups, and I get reports on each of their discussions or sit in on them occasionally. There are multi-level concerns depending on the business. Clearly, we're such a diverse economy here, some of our businesses are much more dependent on direct trade with, say, with a U.S. partner than others. All of us would like this pandemic to not be here. All of us understand that we have to keep doing what we must do to keep our jurisdiction safe in order to steady our chances for recovery.
are you in favor of a continued U.S. border closure?
At this point, yeah, I don't see an alternative.
Mr. Premier, you've been pushing for changes to CERB for a while now, to the point where before you started asking for changes, you brought in your own program to help get Manitobans back to work. What kind of response have you got from the federal government, especially during your time in Ottawa, talking to federal leaders? What have they said about changes? Are they open to changing CERB, or is this just continued pressure to get them to come around?
Just to be clear on the preamble, no, we introduced our program long after we had been advocating to Ottawa to redesign the CERB program. Out of necessity, because there was a penalty there and it remained there, we decided that we had to design a program that would address that penalty. We prefer not to have that program. We prefer the program was designed better. On the second part, I don't want to convey the views of my colleagues in Ottawa, elected officials, in any way. We weren't able to schedule, again, not as a criticism to them, we weren't able to schedule. We thought we were going to be able to meet with some. We weren't able to, but we still had positive meetings. I think the finance minister has already expressed his understanding that there needs to be some redesign work done. He was referring in his comments yesterday, I think, more to the wage subsidy program. But again, I look forward to their response. We've had a good dialogue with Ottawa on an ongoing basis on these issues. We don't agree on everything, but what two thinking people agree on everything? If you're agreeing on everything, you probably one of you isn't thinking. So we're going to have some disagreements, that's fine. But on this one, I just think it's common sense and long overdue that we remove these impediments to people going back and taking another shift after they make $1,000.
Have you been advocating for this sort of phased approach, for the last 2 months or so during those discussions?
Yeah, close to 2 months, yeah.
Sorry if this was asked while I was out of the room, but you mentioned there's not going to be necessarily kind of set dates for things kind of to reopen as we continue on. Obviously, as you mentioned, larger gatherings like football games probably out of the question for now, but any idea on when we might expect to be able to go back to a movie theater or a casino, say?
Yeah, I mean, many of us love our movie experiences. We know they're going to have to change. I believe Dr. Roussin is the person to ask specifically about that, but I know that underlaying his decisions or recommendations to our government is always going to be, what are the positive test outcomes? What are the percentages in respect of that? And so again, my admonition to Manitobans will be the same as Dr. Roussin's in this respect. Just keep following the discipline and following the fundamentals that you've been following, because it's got us where we are. And it is, I'll tell you, quite frankly, really shocking. When we went to these meetings in Ottawa, it was like a post-apocalyptic scene contrasted to the streets of Winnipeg. Incredible to see. On the one hand, encouraging, and I'm so thankful for the way Manitobans have responded to these challenges. And on the other hand, discouraging as you see what other jurisdictions are going through.
Have you felt more comfortable going out here in Winnipeg before? I know you spoke about how you're taking precautions because of your age and your asthma and stuff like that, but are you more comfortable now, say, going to a restaurant or going out some places with your family now?
Yeah, we've had one outing as a family. Like many families, we've been reluctant to do that. It was nice. It was nice to do that. I noticed, and I thank the restaurant that we went to. I won't mention, I'm not going to do a promo today, just I really appreciated the way that they had prepared, the way that their servers worked professionally, the precautions that they had clearly taken. And I'm thankful for that, because I know that it's been very hard for the hospitality industry in our province, across the country, around the world. It's been very, very hard. to deal with COVID, to be shut down initially, then to be allowed to reopen but partially. This is very, very hard. And I encourage Manitobans who feel confident, and I encourage them to understand that this is one of the safest places in the world to be, that if they feel up to it, that with the proper social distancing, that they support one of our local restaurants, one of our local small businesses, if they feel that they can do that safely, and I encourage them to feel that way. I know that nobody's working harder than the small business people in our province to make sure that you're safe and to make sure their workers are safe too.
Premier, you said your wife was with you on the trip. Was she part of the official delegation, or is she self-isolating upon her return home?
Okay, well, Larry, I've always been reluctant, as you know, and I've taken much criticism from your paper for this, for discussing my family's personal affairs with the media. But in this case, I will simply say that our daughter needed to be moved in Toronto. My wife went down to help her, joined me in Ottawa at no expense to you or any other Manitoba taxpayer, and is self-isolating currently upon her return to Manitoba.
Because when you raised the fact that she was there, that I was just wondering if she was part of the official delegation.
No, because you raised it, it's a fair question, and I hope I've answered it fairly.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Stay safe, everybody. We can beat this thing.